Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in Georgia Tech podcast. We're your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I'm Jackson Caudell. Coming to you on Wednesday, September 4th, a few days from game day. And everybody knows what Wednesday means. That's game preview day. And we have a very special guest coming on. We have Emily Leiker from Syracuse.com coming on to talk about the big matchup between Georgia Tech and Syracuse this week. Emily, we thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
RJ, how are you doing, man? You doing good?
Feeling great, man. College football's here. NFL football's back. It's just a great week.
Look, I gave a shout out to everybody last week. We hit 400 subscribers, and I challenged everybody. Let's get to 500. And you know what? I looked up. The first thing I did when I got up early this morning was go check the subscriber count. We're at 503. So again, we really appreciate it. We've seen a lot of growth here lately. Thank you everybody who subscribed and everything. Now we got to get to 600. Like that's the next benchmark. Like we're not done yet. Like we got to get those numbers up. These are rookie numbers. We got to keep going. So we appreciate the support and everything. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when new episodes are out. Like the video. If you're listening on podcast form, make sure to give us a review. Leave us some commentary if you want to. We really appreciate it. We read it. We try to take heed of it, even if the very few mean comments we've got. Like we take that to heart. So, but we appreciate everything. But I guess let's get to the main topic today. Georgia Tech, after beating Florida State, who is, I guess, in a free fall. Is that the correct term I should say for that? They are in an absolute free fall right now. Beat Georgia State last week, and now they have their first ACC road game, which is strange to say for a team that went like 4,000 miles to play a game. They are going on the road to Syracuse. Now, these two teams played last year, but they could not look more different than when they played last year. By the time Syracuse came to Atlanta, they did not have a functional quarterback. They had another head coach. It was very different now. They hired Fran Brown from that school in Athens. They did hire him from there. A lot of new transfers, a lot of new faces. So that's why we wanted to bring on Emily to talk about Syracuse. And I guess just kind of starting off here, this is the first, kind of a talking point with Georgia Tech this week was, when we talked to Brent Key and the players was this is the first time you've seen somebody on film, because they didn't have any film on Florida State. You didn't have any film on Georgia State. And those are two teams that also had a lot of transfers, but you've at least got one game now. It was a little close last week against Ohio, but Syracuse did pull away, won by 16 points, I believe. Kind of what were your first impressions of Fran Brown's first game? Just you can take it anywhere you want to go, offense, defense, just kind of everything, and just kind of tell us what you saw last week.
Yeah, I think last week went about as well as you would think like the first time head coach's debut would go. Like there were hiccups, not everything was perfect, but there were a lot of really good moments too, and especially considering the roster turnover at Syracuse. I mean, they've added upwards of 40 new players, most of those guys being on scholarship. So it's been a lot of change over the past 9 months at Syracuse, and to see them regain footing after a rough first quarter, lockdown, red zone defense, that was one area where we were really impressed. And then obviously Kyle McCord have a career night. Like I don't think there is too much more like in a first game that we could have asked for, that fans could have asked for. If there's one area that there was a little bit of concern, it was the run defense, which obviously is an even bigger concern entering this game. But, I think the big takeaway about Fran specifically that we really had questions about, because this is something that we couldn't really tell just based off practice and off-season stuff, was his play calling and clock management. And we saw him call and execute a scoring drive with 49 seconds left in the first half that then put them up a whole extra touchdown going into halftime. So people are really impressed by that. I thought that was a really nice moment for him to have in his first game. And overall, I think it was a strong debut. Obviously, this week is a debut of its own in the conference and will be a little bit different. But I thought week one went well, even if maybe the scoreboard wasn't as lopsided as some people had been hoping.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes this isn't like a criticism of fans or anything. I think that's just always when they see a game with a big spread or something, they hope, well, we can go out there and win this game like 45-3. And then when it doesn't happen, even though your team played reasonably well, they're a little disappointed. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, first games can be a challenge. RJ, anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it was a solid debut, especially for somebody like we haven't really seen his coaching stripes in the past. So, I thought he went out there and I thought he handled the pressure. That was the one part I was worried about. I feel like he handled the pressure pretty well.
Yeah, and strange fact, I don't know if either of y'all knew this, and I didn't know it until literally 2 days ago. So Brent Key, I don't know if he was a GA or he was an actual coach at Western Carolina when Fran played there. So there is like a relationship there. We asked him about that, and he was like, I was there for 4 months. He was a good player, and that's basically what he told us. So I don't know if they really have like a huge prior relationship, but that's just kind of a strange fun fact. And it's also the second straight game that Georgia Tech's playing a former Georgia assistant. So obviously I think the big talking point, non-defense or injuries or anything like that, was obviously Kyle McCord in the passing game. I was very interested to see because I think at least when you listen to people associated with Ohio State or anything, like they like pushed him out like that. He and I think unfairly, I think he caught the brunt of like, hey, we had a really good team last year. If you were better, we could have gone farther. And so they kind of pushed him aside to, that whole deal. But obviously a really strong debut. I think 4 touchdowns, if I'm correct, and over 300, nearly 350 yards or over 350 yards, like just a really strong debut. I know Brent Key was really complimentary of the offense and how he operated it and the receivers he had around him. Did that, I would assume that maybe surpassed expectations for just his first game. And, is this maybe just the beginning of what could be a really good offense this year?
Yeah, I would say Kyle met and was probably a little bit above the bar of what we were expecting. His official stat line was 27 for 39. So that was about 69% completion percentage, 354 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. I will say that very first drive of the game, he came out and nearly threw 2 picks on the opening drive. And we were all kind of like, oh, well, that's not good. But then he settled in and he looked a lot better throughout the game. We've obviously seen a lot of Kyle in practice, and he's always looked great. He throws a really crisp ball. He's super accurate. He obviously has a very high IQ of the game too, which I think is really important. And so there are very high expectations for him, and I think he is going to surprise some people outside of Syracuse and in the conference. I don't think everyone is as down on him as Syracuse fans like to believe they are. Syracuse fans like to paint Kyle as like this underdog who's been completely disrespected in the past 9 months. And I'm like, okay, you guys, like we're playing that up a little bit. But I do think he will, and we'll end the season and think, wow, like Kyle actually did end up being one of the top 3-4 quarterbacks in the ACC. So yeah, it's hard to compare passing games just because last year was such a weird year for, and even 2022, like Garrett Schrader wasn't fully healthy in 2022 either. And so it's just been weird to compare passing games the past 2 seasons to now, but certainly Arande's return from that list rank injury he suffered early last season was a big deal as well. Him and Trevor Pena, who also had a really big game, they're just really dependable guys. Like they have high IQs. They know how to read defenses really well. They know where a quarterback is going to want them and when they're going to want them there. And so I think those 2 guys are ones that will really help Kyle early in this season. He already has strong connections with them, but as he having connections with them allows him to grow connections with a lot of the other talented wide receivers that Syracuse did bring in and we maybe didn't see as much of in week 1. Because obviously, right, teams are going to catch on to OG and Pena. That's what we saw happen back in 2022 when OG had his breakout year. So certainly going to be a better year than last year for Syracuse in terms of passing. But again, that's a little hard to compare against.
RJ, anything on that?
Yeah, I would just say he is absolutely crucial for Syracuse's success this year because they probably have, a really good schedule in front of them. I think they have a very big amount of winnable games, and we've seen Kyle McCord in the past at Ohio State. For the past 3 years, really, before he was at Syracuse, like he had significant minutes, or I guess downs in all of those games. Thinking basketball in my head. But I think he'll be very crucial to the team's success, and I think he was pretty solid at Ohio State, and I think now he's looking to take it to the next level, and I think that's what we saw against Ohio. That was the Kyle McCord I guess people wanted to see.
I think most people, even if they don't really know much about Syracuse, know who Rondé Gadsden is. Is there any pass catchers or anybody else maybe flying under the radar that you think maybe can have a big year? Maybe not be as good, but like is going to be a big part of the offense?
Yeah, well, I just mentioned Trevor Pena. He was also injured last year, but he's been around for a few years. He had 3 touchdowns this past weekend, so he actually had like the stronger game. Him and OG were really close, but he scored 3 touchdowns. The 2 other big ones I'll mention are the pair of Georgia transfers that Brown brought with him up here in Yazid Haynes and Jackson Meeks. Neither of those guys played a bunch of receiver at Georgia, but we have seen them be really consistent presences and targets for McCord in fall camp and back in spring camp as well. And both of them had a couple good catches, solid catches in the game against Ohio.
Okay. Well, I know the passing game is going to get a lot of attention, but Syracuse has a really talented running back. Kind of how did that look in comparison? And truthfully, I don't know a ton about the Syracuse offensive line, even watching some of the games. So is there anything that anybody should know about that?
Yeah, well, the offensive line, they really revamped when Brown came in. Just went out and got bigger guys that are just like crazy big. You have Savion Washington at right tackle, who's a Colorado transfer. He is 6'9", and obviously over like 300 pounds and huge. And then you have Demetrius Weatherspoon, who is a Howard transfer over at left tackle. And then they have returners on the interior, but they really sought out to make that O-line bigger, stronger. And we did see them look, I think, a little bit more consistent in this first game of the season than what we had seen from previous Syracuse offensive lines recently. But yeah, I mean, LeQuint's the real deal. I think he's going to have a really strong year. We didn't see as much of him against Ohio as I think people thought we were going to. You know, Jeff Nixon, the offensive coordinator here now, he's a running back-minded guy, trained a lot of running backs at the college and the pro level. And so I think we will see a little bit more of him moving forward. And then also Yassine Willis and Will Nixon, Jeff Nixon's son, who are the backups in that room behind LeQuint. But yeah, I mean, LeQuint had, let's see, I just had the stats pulled up. 15 carries for 98 yards. That was an average of 6.5 yards per carry over the weekend. He didn't have a rushing TD, but he did have a pretty sick one-handed catch in the front right corner of the end zone. So he's a dual threat guy. He can do both, and they do use him in both capacities. So definitely a threat to watch out for.
Anything else, RJ, on offense, or should we switch sides?
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I think Georgia Tech is gonna have a lot to handle offensively in Syracuse because you brought up the point of the offensive line getting bigger. I think Syracuse got bigger everywhere else. They got very strong physical guys, even at wide receiver too, guys that are 6'2", 6'3", and you know there's a lot to game plan against.
I mean, I think in our early look kind of episode on Monday, I said like this is going to be the best offense they played this year. Like, and I know I'm not saying a lot. We've all watched Florida State on offense. No disrespect to Georgia State, but I don't think they're going to be very good on offense this year. No, I do think they got a couple of talented guys, but like this, they have dudes everywhere. Like Syracuse has playmakers everywhere, so this is going to be a big test for the defense. Now, conversely, I will say the other side of the ball for Syracuse, that is where Georgia Tech might have the biggest advantage. Ohio had a big day on the ground, and then Syracuse has had a couple of injuries, especially the linebacker Marlowe Wax. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce his name. Okay, just want to be sure. Kind of, I guess, walk us through what those injuries are going to mean, and kind of the big. Is this a big worry? Was it just a one-off game where they weren't prepared? You know, what were the defensive issues, especially on Saturday?
Yeah, you know, the main thing I think was just, I mean, the run defense. I think it was just them needing to click in a new system and get some game reps under their belt to a degree. They really rotated their defensive line, which I think was a choice and one that we kind of knew they were going to make going into game one. You know, their depth chart, there's like 3 guys listed at 3 of the 4 defensive line spots, and that's not because those guys aren't the guys they have on there like aren't talented enough to hold their own, but I think Fran Brown's like really Fran Brown and Elijah Robinson, the defensive coordinator and D-line coach, are both proponents of cycling those guys through to make sure everyone stays healthy and stays energized throughout an entire game. But I am curious to see if they dial that back a little bit and just stick with a more consistent 4 guys just to build a little bit more chemistry there. That was kind of the one thing that we had questions about in terms of the run game. They didn't establish the edge very well either. They have Caudell Diggs on one side, but I do think they're a little weaker on whatever side he's not on, just with the guys they have there. Injury-wise, I mean, Marlowe's really the only huge one. There are a couple defensive guys who were out with fall camp injuries, but Marlowe is the only one to really be concerned about, and he is a big concern. I mean, he's been the heart of their defense for 2-3 years now. Knows that defense really well. He was the guy on the headset for them, listening in on the in-helmet comms on the defensive side. So, that's going to be tough, and they're looking at not having him for about 6 weeks. So not only Georgia Tech, but later down the road, they'll miss a couple other ACC games without him as well. And he had the best PFF grades of anyone on the defense, even missing a full quarter. So that kind of gives you the numbers to know how much of an absence he's going to be. They'll definitely be looking for Derek McDonald, that other starting linebacker, to step up a little bit. He's a really intelligent guy. I think he does have some room to improve on the field. Justin Barron had an uncharacteristically bad game against Ohio. He's been a starter for 3 years now. Very similar guy to Marlowe. It's the heart of this defense, but he seemed a little off, and he did transition his role a little bit from what he was playing in the 3-3-5 to the 4-2-5 now, but not so much that we would have thought he would struggle that much in the game. So I'm curious to see if he's a little bit more locked in and how that affects the run defense on Saturday.
RJ, anything on that?
Yeah, my big thing for Syracuse moving forward defensively is I think you need to see McDonald step up first, but I think you need to see Diggs play in a superstar level role. And I think he did play that against Ohio, because you look strictly at the stat line, like he had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and 4 tackles for loss. So any way you can game plan him, any way you can, find a way to get him one-on-one, like he is going to work, especially against like big guys. I think he's very, very strong, moves very well off of the edge. So I think moving forward, Diggs needs to be a problem. I think that's the storyline for the Syracuse defense going forward.
So one thing we didn't really get to touch on, how does the secondary look? I know that maybe wasn't obviously the primary concern on Saturday, but is that what are the expectations for that group this season?
Yeah, the secondary does return quite a few starters. I mentioned Barron. Elijah Clark's also back. He was one of their highest performing guys last year. Juice Chestnut transferred back from LSU. And then they brought in a couple transfers and a really good true freshman, Marcellus Barnes, for those outside cornerback jobs. And, I think they're pretty solid. I think they just were having to do a little bit of clicking and understanding about roles in this new scheme in that first game. Tackling was a problem across the board, so that's something that they're working to clean up this week in practice. But they're still a solid unit. And I would say, especially now considering Wax's absence in the linebacker room, that secondary room, at least the start of the starting group, is probably the strongest.
Okay. Well, I guess I just wanted to kind of ask you maybe a big picture question. I know they brought in, it's a first-year head coach, a lot of new pieces and everything. I have heard, Syracuse has a more favorable schedule amongst ACC teams. I guess maybe you have to look at that a little bit differently now, I guess. But what maybe should be the expectations for this group? Would you consider maybe a bowl game successful? Do you think maybe if things click right, is there potential to take advantage of the schedule and reach a higher level? Kind of like what do you think the expectations are for this program in year one?
Well, the fan expectations are all over the place. In-house with like the university, we just talked with the athletic director last week, and like he's kind of given Fran like free reign, like this is year one, like I'm not holding you to anything, like let's just see what we can do. And in 1 year, I think media wise, a lot of us are kind of in the 8-4 range, especially given the schedule, which is interesting because like at the end of last year, we're like, oh, next year's schedule looks really easy. And then we got to like summer, and then we were like, wait, maybe this schedule isn't easy. Like NC State, Virginia Tech are on there, and Miami, and like those are all kind of dark horse teams. And now we're a week into the season, kind of like, well, are Virginia Tech and NC State dark horse teams? I don't know. So all of that's a little up in the air, but I still feel like pretty confident that like it's trending towards like a 8-win season. They have to make a bowl game. I don't think this team can finish below 6-6 and get people like and make people happy. Like they have to make a bowl game. Otherwise, like I would say even like for most people, they have to meet 7 wins and meet that kind of threshold that the 2022 team got to in Dino's last year and what was supposed to be the threshold for him last year. I just can't see people being very thrilled with anything less than that.
Anything else, RJ?
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to see, because I feel like 8-4 would be a successful season. I want to see them compete, and we haven't seen them against the ranked teams, I guess you could say, in their schedule, and that would be Georgia Tech, NC State, Miami late in the year. I just want to see them, even if they don't go out and win those games. There's a lot of talent, a lot of older talent, upperclassmen on this team. I just want to see them compete. Maybe against Miami, that might be a game where it could get out of hand because I think they're looking to be one of the best teams in the ACC. But against Georgia Tech this weekend, obviously, and against NC State later in the year, we don't know how they'll look then. But I really want to see them, play up to the level of their opponents, and I think that's very possible.
So we'll get you out of here on this. Again, we really appreciate you taking your time to come on and talk this game with us. I don't know if you're in the predictions business, and you don't have to make one if you don't want to. But if you don't want to make a prediction about the game, I guess you can – what if Syracuse wins this game, what will be the biggest key? And if they lose this game, like why do you think that is?
Well, you guys are lucky. You caught me right after I just sent in my official prediction for our staff, and I went Georgia Tech 34, Syracuse 31. Though I did say that I could see that being flipped. I think this is going to very much be like an offensive kind of shootout, and where I see Georgia Tech having the advantage, like, isn't just the run game itself, but it's like the control of the clock that comes with having a really good run game, right? Like Georgia Tech could run out 10 minutes of the first quarter and leave Syracuse with 5. And while we saw a snippet of what Fran Brown and his new staff can do in kind of those crunch time scenarios, like it's hard to do a bunch of those in a game with an offense and have your defense on the field for that long and all of that. So I think control of the clock is really going to be a key thing. And I see Georgia Tech probably being stronger there just because of the run game. And so I think that'll be a tipping factor. I mean, the only way I think Syracuse can flip this is if they shut down that run game, and that's going to be really hard with Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. Like those are just 2 really talented dudes. Everyone here knows that. So yeah, I think it'll be close. I think there will be a lot of back and forth. There will be a lot of action offensively, but it's going to come down to that clock and who can control the time.
I think you just became every Georgia Tech fan favorite Syracuse writer. Like I think you hit it out of the park with that one. But we really appreciate you coming on to talk about this game, Emily. And I'll just say if they meet in the ACC championship somehow in Charlotte, you're more than welcome to come back on here and a college football playoff bid could be on the line between these 2 teams in December, and you are more than welcome to come back on and talk about it.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Absolutely. See you later. All right. Well, we really appreciate Emily coming on to give us the Syracuse side of things. And now we're going to do what we always do and kind of give it from a Georgia Tech perspective. So I think we covered it, I think, from the the strengths and the weaknesses. I guess let's start. Let's start with defense this week. I know we usually kind of start with offense, but I think, when I wrote about it, kind of an early look at this matchup a couple of weeks ago, or not a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago, I wrote that I think how they match up against the passing game is just going to be crucial. Because I think for the strides the defense has shown this year, especially in run defense and tackling, this is going to be by far, I think, the best passing offense. I mentioned that earlier. It's just the amount of weapons they use and everything. Like Gadsden is an all ACC caliber of offensive player. LaQuint Allen is an all ACC caliber of running back. Like the ACC, I know a lot of gets like they're the conference of quarterbacks, saying they're the conference of running backs to me. Like LaQuint Allen and Jamal Haynes, like this is a running back matchup right here. And I do favor Jamal in that one, but LaQuint Allen's a really good player. I think it's going to come down to I want to see how Tyler Santucci tries to match up with them. And if he tries to, one of the things he did against Florida State was he did not respect the downfield passing attack. And you saw LaMiles Brooks coming on blitzes. You saw a lot of defensive backs coming from all over the field trying to pressure DJU into making some bad throws. You didn't see that quite as much last week. And I wonder if that's going to be the case this week because, again, for the strides they have made on defense, they only have one sack through 2 games. And look, you can't always judge a pass rush just strictly by the section. There's pressure numbers, there's win rates, there's all things. I think the pass rush has still been a little lackluster, and that's where you could get hurt this week. Especially, if Syracuse was able to bottle up the run game a little bit better than you might think. If they can't get pressure on McCord, he has plenty of receivers to attack you downfield.
Yeah, and we really touched on this earlier. Like this Syracuse receiving room, especially Gadsden, like those are a ton of very strong, very big, very physical guys. Like Gadsden is 6'5", and we've kind of seen game plan. We've never seen game plan from Tyler Santucci, but looking back to last year, we've seen the game plan against bigger wide receivers. And maybe it's time for a change. I think Tyler Santucci, he's going to have his hands full. I really think he is. I think there's a lot that Syracuse can bring. I think they're kind of similar to Georgia Tech offensively maybe last year, where towards the end of the year you kind of saw this downfield attack and Haynes King really unloading, Eric Singleton being in there. I'm gonna be completely honest. Like this Syracuse offense could succeed very, very easily. I think their offensive line is very solid. It's just going to be a matter of, okay, how do you match up against their wide receivers? I think that's the strong point of this offense, and where I can really see it tipping from one side to another.
Man, who is excited to play this game? Warren Burrell talked to the media today, and he's like, "I'm happy to play passing first offense. So this is what you can do." And look, I think the secondary's been pretty good. Like I think Warren Burrell's been really good. If you've been listening since April, I think me and Archie have been telling you Warren Burrell's a good player, and him and Amari Harvey have formed a really good tandem. But yeah, I agree. I think the defensive line, specifically the pass rush, is just going to be the key to the defense this week. And that's again that's what I'm interested. And again, this is not meant to be disrespect towards Georgia State. I do wonder, some of their success last week. I do wonder if Tyler Santucci was not, showing his full hand. I know he did a little bit against Florida State, but I wonder if there were some things, hey, I don't want to put on film for Syracuse, because I think you'll attack them very differently than what you did against Florida State. But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, pass rush is just going to be super important. If you can't get it with 4, that means you got to start blitzing. Just plain and simply, you have to start blitzing, and that could leave some guys in one-on-one situations. And now they've passed that test for the first couple of weeks. I do think this is again going to be the best passing attack they've seen. So I don't rate the Syracuse offensive line super high. I don't. I know Florida State's was very disappointing, but I don't think in terms of raw talent they can match. I think they're better than Georgia State's, but again, pressure. That's what it's going to come down to on defense this week. And forcing some turnovers, I think, would be good. Outside of the Georgia State fumble last week, they haven't really had a ton of turnover opportunities. So, anything else you wanted to add on defense?
Yeah, you kind of talked about how pass rush is very imminent for this game. Like if you are not getting to Kyle McCord, he really is going to take advantage. I just think we kind of need to see more out of the front seven in general. I think the run fits have been good at times. The only question that arose for me last week was Georgia State was kind of able to have these explosive plays, get the ball down the field. In the red zone, Georgia Tech absolutely turned it to another level. Like I will say that. When Georgia State was in the red zone, like there were plenty of times they did not score or scored a field goal or this or that. I just want to see less explosive plays from the Syracuse offense. I know that's a lot to ask, especially when you have a guy like LaQuint Allen who has broken away a ton of big plays. I want to see them limit explosive plays. I think that's another key to the game.
Yep. And, I'll go ahead and say I think the key player this week is Romello Height. You got a key player on defense? Romello, is it or is it somebody else?
I want to say Romello Height, but I'll put I'll say Zeke Biggers because I think he's kind of got to be the leader of this defense going forward.
My honorable mention is the two cornerbacks. Just you're going to be matched up with some really good players, so you're going to probably be in some one-on-ones too. So obviously everybody on defense is important, but I think those two are going to be they can win more often than not. I think that'll be because I do think now even at Ohio State, and Emily mentioned like a couple times last week, like Kyle McCord can be a little reckless with the ball sometimes. Like he's not super turnover prone, but there are times when I've watched him is he can get a little careless. So I think if you can make things difficult for him, you might get a turnover out of it. But one of the ways that you can keep an offense off the field, and especially an explosive one, which Syracuse does look to be, is you control the clock, which I think Emily nailed it. I think Georgia Tech is going to play keep away in this game. I think they're going to look at those rushing numbers and that rushing defense last week, and they're going to pound it and just keep going and running the ball. Like I think this could be like a career game for Jamal Haynes potentially. I don't think Syracuse is going to be able to stop them very much, to be honest with you. I just what I saw last week, and then on top of that, you're missing your best player. And I mean, the fact that Ohio got all those rushing yards with him on the field, for some of that in the first place, like that would be very concerning. And I think Georgia Tech is easily one of the best rushing teams in the entire country. So, look, run heavy, hitting your explosive plays through the air. Very similar to last week, but yeah, I definitely think Georgia Tech's offense has just a massive advantage over Syracuse's defense.
Yeah, and I will say I think the offensive line has a great advantage, and they have been amazing. Like they have shown their stripes really throughout the first two games. Like we went into Florida State, we thought honestly the defensive line for Florida State was going to be really good. Like that was one of the biggest question marks heading into the game, and they really showed up, and they showed up again in week 2. I think that's again going to be one of the keys, but we know what this Georgia Tech offense can do. We know, especially running, like they had 5.3 yards per carry against Florida State. They had 6.5 or 6.6 against Georgia State. I think you have a ton of guys, and I'm not sure what we're going to see backup running back wise. Not sure if it's going to be Trey Cooley, Anthony Carey. Haven't really heard much on that, but I think any guy you put in there is really going to do well. I think the offensive line has just put Georgia Tech in such a good standpoint offense-wise, and especially running the ball.
Well, she mentioned, Ohio being able to get to the edges. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw, look, you had the Eric Singleton reverse last week. Buster loves getting Malik Rutherford to the edges and getting him the ball and getting him in space. I think you're going to see some of that. And then I think you're going to see Haynes can keep the ball and run it too. I just think Georgia Tech has a big advantage here. Anything else we need to touch on offense? I think, we've covered it a pretty decent bit. I think the most important player, I'll take the easy way out and just say Jamal Haynes. Like I could say the offensive line just, because they're going to pave the way for him. But the Syracuse run defense is putrid, and I think Jamal Haynes can have a big day as a result.
I'm going to go a little bit different direction. Like you said, Buster Faulkner likes to get Malik Rutherford open on the sides of the field. He is leading the ACC in receiving yards right now. He's 5th in the country. I think Malik Rutherford is going to be crucial. I think he's one of the best blockers on the team wide receiver wise. And I think we're going to see him get open in a lot of ways. Kind of like you said with Eric Singleton, like maybe we see a Malik Rutherford jet sweep or, end around play. Just get tricky against Syracuse. That's kind of one thing I want to see.
Yep. So we are in the prediction business. We give ours every week, and we have not led you astray so far. We are 2-0 so far this season. I do think there is a chance I do think this has a good chance of being a little bit of a shootout. Again, I think the defense is better. I think it's improved. I also think that Syracuse can present a lot of challenges. Like if Syracuse puts up 25 to 30 points this week, my first reaction walking away wouldn't be, well, oh, man, we just gave all those points up to Syracuse. Like, no, Syracuse is going to score points this year, I think, just based on the talent they have and watching them last week. They look really crisp, especially after the first quarter. So, I do think they're going to be able to put up some points, especially if Georgia Tech can't get pressure on Kyle McCord. But at the end of the day, I think the bigger advantage lies with Georgia Tech's run game. I do trust Tyler Santucci to be able to come up with a scheme that can limit Syracuse's passing attack a lot more than I trust Syracuse to be able to stop Georgia Tech on the ground. I just think losing Marlo Wax is just a really big deal, and I just don't see how they're going to be able to hold up against the physicality that Georgia Tech's going to bring up front. So I'll go – she already said 34-31. I'll go 30-27. I think it'll be in that range, and that's right about where the total is. I think the total will end up being at 60. I think it's at 61 now, so it's right around the total.
Yeah, see, you're in the exact same place as I wanted to be and that Emily was. So, I guess I'll pick Georgia Tech by a touchdown to be different. Okay. I'll say Georgia Tech 34, Syracuse 27. Although I could see this game scoring a lot higher for both teams. I just think there's a lot of recipes for success. But one big thing that we forgot to talk about, one big news, probably the biggest in Georgia Tech for a minute. Georgia Tech is ranked for the first time since 2015, and
I was going to
kind of forgot to talk about.
No, I was going to save it till the end, but yeah,
okay.
Just go ahead. That's obviously huge news. First time since 2015 that Georgia Tech has been ranked. That they absolutely deserve it. They've worked their butts off. And look, I know some people I agree with the sentiment of, hey, rankings don't matter right now. Just keep plugging ahead. And look, again, I agree with you. But I do think that these kids and this coaching staff do deserve some recognition for the hard work that they've put in. It's not just this year; it's just what they were able to do last year and carry and be able to keep having success this year. I think they definitely deserve it. I was a little worried. I'll be honest with you. Just 100%. Just after the way Florida State played the other night, I didn't know if voters were going to be like, okay, Florida State sucks. We're not going to rank Georgia Tech, because I felt comfortable about it before that game, and then just how badly Florida State played, I was like, man, this could be interesting. But they did come in ranked number 23. They are ranked ahead of NC State and Clemson.
Yeah.
So hang your hat on that. If nothing else, they are for the time being ranked ahead of NC State and Clemson. And look, you win this game, you win VMI next week, you will have a ranked on ranked matchup versus Louisville, because I expect Louisville to just pulverize Jacksonville State this weekend. So, and then they have a bye week, so that they should stay ranked. They jumped up as well. Just great for the program. But again, we're very early in the season. Just got to keep moving forward. It's a nice thing, but just they got to keep moving forward. Yeah,
but we can celebrate a little bit,
Sure. I just it's just so early on right now, and it's rankings. It's just there's a lot of challenges ahead. You got to now. Once you're ranked, you got to stay ranked. You don't want to be the team that was ranked for 1 week and then lost to Syracuse. So.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat earlier. If they beat Syracuse, this will be their first win as a ranked team since the Tulane game in 2015. Just gonna put this out there. I was 8 the last time Georgia Tech was ranked. It's really been a minute.
Man, and that was my freshman year of college. Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, yes, I'm a little bit older than RJ. So yeah, it's just big accomplishment for the program. Now let's see, it's just another, building block that you can go off of. But yeah, Georgia Tech will be number 23 heading into this game. They are favored on the road versus Syracuse. And me and RJ are both thinking they're going to get a win, but I do think this is going to be a close game. It's going to be a challenge. I do think Syracuse can be a tricky place to play. Look, I would never rank it as like a top 5 place in college football to try to win a game. This isn't going to LSU or going to Penn State or going to Texas A&M, I guess. But there have been a lot of times where even a more heavily favored team than Georgia Tech is Saturday's going in there. I think we all remember Clemson going in there as the number 1 team in the country. They were number 1 or 2, like 2017, I think that was, and they lost. There have been teams that go up there being favored, and even Syracuse isn't very good, and they lose. Like it's a tricky place to play up there in the old Carrier Dome. So that'll be a challenge. But Brent Key has played pretty well on the road. To be honest, he beat Miami on the road last year. He beat Pitt in North Carolina when he was an interim coach on the road. Beat Virginia Tech on the road as well when he was an interim coach. So they have had success doing that. So we'll see if he can continue doing that. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in. Like I said, hey, we have surpassed 500. We cannot thank you enough for that. We want to keep climbing. We want to be spreading the good Georgia Tech content everywhere and just keep on doing it. And we really appreciate you guys for following along and showing support. It means a lot to us. So be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, hit the notification bell so you know whenever a new episode is out. If you're listening and following on podcasts, do the same over there. Just give us a follow, give us a rating. We really appreciate you guys. And, we hope this is going to be a great season. It's off to a great start. Big challenge ahead on Saturday. But anything else, RJ?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, we will be back on Saturday afternoon right after the game concludes for an instant reaction, and we will see you guys then. Thank you for tuning in.